you all for coming, and if you actually walked past Rice Park on this beautiful day to come here, thank you double, because it looks beautiful. So if you didn't get to do that, go wander in there after we're done. And thank you, Amy. Thank you, Landmark Center and SPNN. Professor Painter and I have kind of tried to collaborate for a while when we found out we had common interests. He was an early signer of the pledge to support the amendment in Congress when he was a candidate. So I'm really grateful that we're able to put this together today. When you say money in politics, that's really a generic term. It's shorthand for getting big money interests out of our political system. And with the Supreme Court rulings that have enabled unlimited spending by groups, special interest groups, corporations, unions, 501c3s, 4s, whatever, we really have lost control of our voices because their megaphone is so much louder than ours. So passing an amendment is really the only way to permanently change the situation. It's unconstitutional for us to pass campaign finance laws other than disclosure, but unfortunately there's no political will to pass disclosure. Richard and I talked about how we wanted to go through this meeting, and I'm just going to kind of throw him topics and questions so that he can reply, because he certainly is much more knowledgeable than I am in a lot of issues. But first he's going to share a little bit about how Take Back Our Republic got started.
Thank you, Vicki. I have worked on campaign finance related issues for a number of years since I left the Bush White House in 2007, came out here to the University of Minnesota to teach law. I teach corporate law, securities law, but also government ethics. Before that, I taught at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. I've seen over many decades in my life watching politics, both in Illinois, which has a very interesting reputation when it comes to the ethics of public officials, and here in Minnesota, and of course Washington, D.C., the various means by which special interests seek to corrupt our government. But in recent years, we've moved away from the old method of bribery, the cash in the paper bag, the type of thing that was last caught on camera in the famous Abscam investigation, to corruption, bribery of politicians. It's the same transaction, but it's done through political campaigns, not just the campaigns themselves, which do have disclosure obligations, and there are limits on the amount of money you can contribute to a campaign, but also through these dark money organizations, 501c4 organizations set up under Section 501c4 of the Internal Revenue Code. That was the type of entity that tried to run a hit movie against Hillary Clinton, and it was called Citizens United. And they took on the Federal Election Commission because the Federal Election Commission wanted to pass a law duly enacted by Congress that would have prohibited corporate money from the corporate treasuries of companies going into an outfit like Citizens United, a 501c4 group that was basically trying to influence an election. The Supreme Court of the United States sided with Citizens United and struck down that law, the McCain-Feingold law, that had been passed by Senators McCain and Feingold, one Republican, one Democrat. I looked into the history of this, and I found that there are a lot of conservative Republicans, a lot of people who are a lot more conservative than I am, who had supported campaign finance reform, including Barry Goldwater, who wrote about in his book, The Conscience of a Conservative. So that's what inspired me to take a year off in 2015 to 16. Actually, it's 2014 to 15. I went to Harvard University, was able to bankroll this project, so I went out east and wrote this book on why political conservatives should support campaign finance reform. And I addressed a whole bunch of different conservatives, including people a lot more conservative than I am on social issues and a wide range of things. Say, well, you folks too ought to be in favor of campaign finance reform. And indeed, the polling data shows just that political conservatives at the grassroots level, as well as moderates and liberals, everyone is fed up with the campaign finance system. And, but not Mitch McConnell. Well, why not? Because he's getting the gravy. And it all comes in through him, and he gets to dole it out. And if you don't behave and do what Mitch wants, block a Supreme Court justice, or ram one through, depending on the circumstances, then he doesn't give you any of it. So this is why we found to take back our republic. A number of us believe that we needed an organization that would reach out to libertarians, to conservatives, people who, in other ways, might like Mitch McConnell for whatever reason, but are fed up with the money in politics. And the organization has done very well. We headquartered down in Auburn, Alabama, out of the Beltway, and I went out and found someone very different from myself, who was a real social conservative to head it up, John Pudner, and it's done very, very well. So this is a critically important issue. And I know that we're distracted by Trump and the Russians and all of that, but when we're finished with Trump, I hope it's sooner rather than later, we got to get back to the problem that we are not going to have a democracy in this country where Americans choose our own president and our own Congress if we don't get the money out of politics. Because you have Chinese companies, you name it. Yeah, I mean, Chinese companies, Saudi companies, everywhere, buying up properties right and left, buying up companies right and left. And, of course, we've got two multinational corporations run by foreign billionaires that want to get into the sulfide mining business here in Minnesota. But I'll talk about that later. Don't get me going now.
Well, does the candidate with the most financial backing always win? No, not always. Only about 91% of the time. That's all. So we don't know who's spending what in our elections. In the old days, I hate to say that now, but that's the way it was, before media consolidation, investigative reporters would go do deep dives and spend the time and the money necessary to research who's giving money to who and shed the light on it. But due to media consolidation, a lot of investigative journalists found themselves without jobs. And we're kind of relying on a media that's biased, and a lot of us don't even know it's biased, but they don't know the other unbiased because it never existed in their adult lifetime. So how do we break up a media consolidation like that and get an unbiased access to the actual facts instead of whatever they want us to hear? We want to hear what we need to hear.
Well, that's the separate area of the law, the antitrust laws, and also Federal Communications Commission, which ought to be enforcing laws that have been passed by Congress that at least try to have some diversification in the media. We've been fighting this battle ever since the 1950s, but it's moved in the wrong direction. There's more and more consolidation. You got outfits like Sinclair that own radio stations all over the place. More and more newspapers are controlled by large companies that actually then run local newspapers. And that's a travesty. And I will emphasize now that right here in Minnesota, I've seen an example of this. When it comes to taking on the interests that are pushing sulfide mining in this state, it is newspapers such as the Timberjack up in Ely that they have blown the cover on that. They have much better journalism than the Star Tribune, and I don't know what's going on with the Star Tribune, but they won't even publish a letter written by former Governor Arnie Carlson. He submitted to the Star Tribune on sulfide mining 2 weeks ago, and they wouldn't publish it. I don't know what's going on, but the Timberjay up there in Ely, they have written very good articles on this. MinPost is doing some good work on that issue. We need more diversification in the media. And we can't just have a country where people are sitting at home watching Fox News and then reading whatever paper is controlled by various oligarchs who don't want the truth coming out. So it's a serious issue.
Well, is it a failure of our current antitrust laws? Do we need to revamp those given the current situation with a lot of different industries? Or is it that there's no political will to enforce what we already have on paper?
That's a combination of the two. Our Federal Communications Commission isn't doing anything with respect to media concentration. They want to make sure that Sinclair, I guess, gets more radio stations. They are very, very concerned about CNN, though. We're definitely going after CNN on the antitrust laws. Oh, yeah, big time. They're going to go after the AT&T Time Warner merger because they don't like the CNN, which is controlled by Time Warner. So it's political, selective enforcement of antitrust laws and media concentration laws. That's what's going on under the Trump administration. But we could use better laws out of Congress as well.
Well, and since Polymet is pretty much on your mind, when we spoke last week, you mentioned colonialization of when you were talking about Polymet. And I don't think we've heard a colonizing term since fifth grade history unless we've been watching sci-fi movies. So could you please explain what you meant by that?
Well, this has been going on for centuries, where it was predominantly European countries, but now we have China and the Act, and the United States has been doing it around the world, where large corporations will go and seek to extract natural resources in various places around the world. Usually that's done. I mean, the old days ago, they actually setting up a colony. You had the British Empire and all that. But now you don't necessarily go through that formal process. You simply have people on the ground who are going to ingratiate themselves with local politicians and help the company extract resources. And it's usually a hit and run job. They extract the resources they want, they get out, and they leave everyone else to pick up the mess. This is going on in mining, it's going on in fossil fuels, and in many, many different industry sectors. With respect to mining here in Minnesota, there are two big companies. One of them is called Glencore. They're the ones who control Polymet. Polymet's a penny stock company in Toronto that's controlled by Glencore, which is a multinational Swiss metals conglomerate founded by Mark Rich. He's the fugitive who was pardoned by Bill Clinton on his last day of office. Glencore also has wonderful trading partners such as Oleg Deripaska, who is the Russian oligarch currently under sanctions, head of Rusal. The CEO of Glencore has received the Presidential Medal of Freedom from President Putin. So we can see we're dealing with a very nice cast of characters. If you just Google Glencore, you'll see they're under investigation for corruption all over the world. The Serious Fraud Office in London, the UK is after them, the United States Department of Justice, the Chinese, and they've got some trouble down in the Congo, and some of the mines that were a mess in Australia. The list goes on and on. So this company is going to come into this state, and they're going to open up a mine through Polymet, which they control. Polymet was a separate company. They sold a bunch of stock. Stock's down in the toilet, so those investors really got ripped off. And now, basically, Glencore is going to water down the stock and control the entire company, probably end up with 75% of it. They get to open up the mine. How much has Glencore put on the table to guarantee this mine? To guarantee cleanup, which could be up to $1 billion of sulfide, all that gets into the waterways, into the Lake Superior watershed. How much money did Glencore put on the table? Nothing, zero. I went through the financial guarantees given to our DNR. I searched for the name Glencore, it's not even there. So they set this up as a shell company. So that's one example. Then the other one is called Twin Metals. It's owned by a man from Chile who's a billionaire. And I ran into him about 2 years ago over at the Brookings Institution in Washington, giving a speech, and he'd given money. I guess he gave money, he didn't really want to watch me talk. He wanted to chat afterwards about his mine, whatever. He's got $1 billion. He also bought a very nice $10 or $12 million house in the Colorado section of Washington, D.C. Why? Because Jared and Ivanka wanted to live in that house, so he rents it to them. So we're going to have Jared, Ivanka's landlord. He wants to open up a second sulfide mine up in the Boundary Waters. This is going to be a huge mess. And we're going to destroy our waterways in this state so foreign billionaires can come in here and do this. And it is sad that I see not only the Republican Party has been bought by this, but large chunks of the Democratic Farmer Labor Party as well. And it is a very, very bad situation. And we need to deal with it. Former Governor Arnie Carlson is on this. He's helping me. And there are a number of people, Betty McClellan from right from this district, she's great on this issue. That is fabulous. So we've got to hold them accountable. We cannot let this self-fund money get going in this state. It is corrupt.
Okay, that's two things we need to be mad about, right? Here's a third.
I haven't even started on Trump.
Know, right? No, this is league.
Oh.
So there was I hate it when people start so in their sentence. There was an article in the Star Tribune this morning, and then I saw it was in Washington Post also, about the shadow banking industry has resurfaced, and apparently there is risky loans make a $15 trillion comeback was the title. So should we all be putting our money in our mattresses?
Well, depends on the quality of the mattress, I guess. But this is another serious problem. We go through these financial crises, and then we think we cleaned it up, and cleaned it up for a while, and then we have another one. 2008 was not that long ago. That took place because of the deregulation of the Wall Street banks, plus the concentration of the large banks. They became bigger and bigger, too big to fail. Well, then they did fail, and we saw what happened. It destroyed the economy. It's easy to forget, but it could very, very well happen again. I wrote a book with Claire Hill, my colleague at the University of Minnesota. It's called Better Bankers, Better Banks, published by the University of Chicago Press in 2015, and we discussed this problem. In a way, it's quite simple. What happened on Wall Street was that the large investment banks used to be partnerships where the partners were personally liable for the debts of the partnership. And so if it went down, those fellows paid, and they were all men at the time. But the 50s, 60s, 70s, they were partnerships. Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Salomon Brothers, Merrill Lynch, all the great names, general partnerships. Personally liable if the bank failed. The bank got hit with a fine. It came out of the partner's pocket. And they did some misbehavior. You're never going to cut out all the misbehavior on Wall Street. But it was a lot better than what started in the 1980s, because in the 1980s they changed them from partnerships to corporations, where they had limited liability. The great thing about the corporate form, you get all those First Amendment rights under the Citizens United case, but when it comes time to pay, you don't have to pay, because it's the corporation is the person. If the corporation's bankrupt, all the people who hoovered money out of it get to walk away. So all the big bankers, they aren't partners anymore. They're managing directors. And they're paying themselves enormous salaries. And then if the thing tanks, well, goodbye. They're off to the Hamptons. Well, that's what happened with Lehman Brothers. None of those people were personally liable for what happened when Lehman Brothers failed. That wouldn't have happened in the old Lehman Brothers run by Bob Lehman in the 1960s. They would have everyone on personally liable. And they didn't act that way. So that's just sort of the Wall Street equivalent of what Glencore is doing to us on the money. They'll set up Polymed, a penny stock company, and say, yeah, they'll be liable for cleanup. There's nothing there to pay for cleanup. That's the corporate form. The big guys behind, they don't want to pay when it's time to clean up, whether it's the environment or whether it's Wall Street. And yep, we could get another one, because this administration has zero interest in sound financial regulation. Donald Trump has always loved free money.
Matter still? Okay. Let's talk about big tech. The website opensecrets.org shows the money spent on lobbying reported by a common word. You can search by a word, and it'll come up how much money was spent. In researching the big four in the tech world, I found the following. Google spent $23 million lobbying Congress in 2018, referencing the word competition. Facebook spent $12.6 million lobbying Congress in 2018, referencing the words data breach. And in 2018, Google, Facebook, and Amazon spent collectively $66.4 million lobbying Congress regarding privacy issues. So will this type of spending be enough to keep them safe from antitrust regulations? Because there's action right now trying to hold them accountable. And how would breaking these companies up benefit us, or as consumers, Is there a way we can force change short of unplugging?
Well, I assume they're not just spending money on lobbying, but probably plowing quite a bit into campaigns. Not just what you see on Open Secrets, which is the stuff that comes in the front door campaigns, but money going in the back door, which is the 501c4 organizations and everything else blessed by the United States Supreme Court in the Citizens United case. And the big tech industry is doing this, and they are going to have a lot of influence, just as Wall Street did. And they're very good at making sure both political parties are very well taken care of. So that it doesn't become a partisan issue where they'll be on the outs if the Democrats come in or on the outs if the Republicans come in. They take care of people on both sides of the string. And that's been true of Wall Street as well. A little less so of the fossil fuels industry, but although they play both sides too sometimes. So this is a serious problem because in order to get elected, politicians are going to be dependent on high tech and on the banking sector, and they're not going to want to double cross them. And I guess I can't get too much detail about political parties, but here at the League of Women Voters. But I guess I'll say that the high tech people generally tend to be on social issues very liberal, so they support candidates who are liberal on the social issues, and then that may make those candidates beholden to them on some of the high-tech industry concentration issues. It's somewhat of a repeat of the phenomenon we had in the 1990s during the Clinton administration, where Wall Street went, quite strongly in the direction of the Democrats in the Clinton years. One, because a lot of Wall Streeters agreed with them on the social issues, and then two, well, there was something also to be gained, and indeed a lot of the deregulation of the banks took place in the Clinton years. So if we don't get money out of politics, it's going to be a very bad situation, and the high-tech industry, everyone from Facebook to Google, the monopoly power they already have is going to become even stronger.
But in the late 80s, early 90s, we broke up the bells. And I worked for a telephone company, a little telephone company, that had to sell their cable company because they weren't allowed to have both. What's changed since then?
Well, it's the role of money in politics. So they're willing to break up the bells. They went after after them, but they allowed more and more consolidation on Wall Street. Now we could say that was a public policy-made decision. Well, we need to break up the bells, but we didn't need to break up what was going on Wall Street. Or, well, follow the money. Who's giving money to who? ATT, ITT. They give it a lot to the Republicans. I don't know if they took care of the Democrats. Well, the Wall Street people definitely knew how to take care of both parties. So, maybe that's the cynical side of me, but a lot of the decisions that are made in Washington do turn on the money. And it's not that the politicians will necessarily change their position dramatically depending on the money, but they'll set their priorities differently. In other words, okay, we're going to bust up monopolies. There are a lot of monopolies out there. So if you decide you're going to bust up monopolies, well, which ones do we start with? And somehow you just have to start with the people who didn't support your political campaigns. So if you got a monopoly and you don't want to get nailed by an incoming administration that might be different than this one, make sure to take care of them now. Then you'll be at the bottom of the priority list. They won't necessarily come out in favor of your monopoly, but they won't mess with it. And that's just not right.
But you mentioned fossil fuel subsidies. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres commented at a conference in Vienna on climate change last month. And he said, many people still think that to give fossil fuel subsidies is a way to improve living conditions of people. There's nothing more wrong than that. What we're doing is using taxpayers' money, which means our money, to boost hurricanes, to spread droughts, to melt glaciers, to bleach corals. In one word, to destroy the world. So ExxonMobil Corp is the largest American oil and gas producer. Their CEO made $15.8 million in 2018 in total compensation, and after the tax cut, the corporate fourth quarter profit quintupled to $5.94 billion, up from $1.68 billion a year earlier. The group Oil Change International estimates that eliminating subsidies would save us $4 billion annually. Who decides what corporations or industries get subsidies, and why would we give financial assistance to a profitable industry that is actually endangering our health and our planet?
Because they got money and they want more of it.
There you go.
That's what's happening. It's pretty simple. And, you know, we go through each one of these deals. The one I've been looking at is the pipelines. Enbridge wants to put that pipeline, line 3, in there. And, you know, run that down through Minnesota. You know, they're going to run that over a lot of land. I mean, it's not necessarily a direct cash subsidy from the state, but it basically is because they're running that pipeline through. They got a lot of easements. There's going to be substantial public cost and jeopardy of the environment from that pipeline. And one thing they always do is they sing jobs, jobs, jobs. You always hear that line. And for some reason, there are people, you know, up in the Iron Range who want to keep falling for that line, from whether it's the pipeline companies or from the sulfide mining companies. And it's a crock of baloney. They're not going to create very many jobs for very long, and they're going to destroy the environment. So with respect to long-term economic growth and tourism and other areas, we've diminished the value of the land, and it destroys the economy. But they have the influence. There's just an article I tweeted out yesterday about Enbridge. Apparently what they do is they set up these so-called grassroots organizations that are pro-pipeline. And they get to say, well, you got to be pro-worker. And then they take care of the labor unions and a few union bosses. And then you got the unions on board. And then the next thing you know, they're hounding Governor Walz and calling him all sorts of names just because he wants the courts to take another look at Line 3. At least on that one, the governor got that one sorted out right. And they give them a lot of heat, and they got members of the state senate, I guess I can't mention any names here, but whatever, getting up there and chewing out the governor and telling him that he's going to lose the Iron Range for the DFL. Why? Because he won't support this pipeline. Well, the money was pushing all this coming right from Enbridge, and of course they're headquartered up there in Edmonton, Canada. They're having a great time. They're also doing it in Michigan, too. They're doing the same stunt in Michigan. So we're not alone.
Okay. So, everybody finished eating, right? The 4 largest companies control 66% of pork packing, 82% of beef packing, 85% of corn seeds, and 80% of soybean seeds. 4 grain traders control the movement and allocation of nearly 73% of the world's grain. The top 4 specialty canners account for nearly 3/4 of the market of goods such as beans, baby food, and soups. Corporate consolidation leads to reduced choice, less innovation, and increased prices for consumers. In 2018, over $37 million was spent lobbying in the agricultural services product sector. And of the $4.7 million spent in the meat processing and product sector, all but $1 million was spent by 4 corporations. We're all familiar with the term monopoly, but in farming, and I don't know if it affects other industries, but oligopsony is the term that's used at the National Farmers Union Convention. And as people are eating their lunch, hopefully you're finished, how is this affecting us?
All I know is that Minnesota soybean farmers aren't getting diddly squat out of this deal. We got the price of soybeans at record low. The Chinese apparently won't buy from us because we've got a difficult person in the White House, I'll put it nicely. So the farmers are, you know, it's going to get worse. We get more consolidation in farming because the farming's unprofitable because of the trade war. People will lose their farms to the banks, probably foreign-owned banks. And then more and more of the farmland is going to be bought up by a large corporate interest. The same on the pork side, the prices there are low. So the money's not going to farmers. There's an enormous amount of money with large food corporations. I actually know the Chinese man who's number 1 or 2 at the company that bought Smithfield Foods. And he's very nice, very smart businessman. He had a very nice $10 million house out in Weston, Massachusetts. He told me that, you know, in order to get Smithfield Foods, they had to go down there to Virginia. He didn't know that much English, but he knew all you need to do is go to NASCAR races with the politicians. And so he went NASCAR race and did what you need to do. But that's an example of, the acquisition of Smithfield Foods by a Chinese corporation. That, without getting into the merits, and I'm not an expert on food production and on the markets there, but the one thing I do know is that it is not right for decisions to be made by American politicians because a large multinational conglomerate, in this case it's a company headquartered in China, wants this or wants that. And we shouldn't be able to choose the Chinese government either. We've done plenty of that, going around the world trying to tell people what their government ought to be, and that's wrong. But it's happening to us now, and that's where we're going to be colonized, and we're going to be carved up into spheres of influence by the Chinese, by the Saudis, by the Europeans, by everybody else, just the same way China, or at least portions of China, were in the turn of the 20th century, by the European powers, if we keep our campaign finance system. So there are two separate discussions, and one is the subject that is sort of out of my bailiwick, which is how should we produce food, what should the pricing be, and how much concentration and the rest of it. But the one thing I know is that those companies should not be using their money to influence our politics, particularly those companies are controlled outside the United States. And the campaign finance system under Citizens United allows it, and don't buy that line that they give you that, well, foreign nationals are not allowed to contribute to American political campaigns. That's just sheer nonsense. And I knew that was sheer nonsense before the Russians did what they did. Because you can't keep the foreign money out. If you're going to have a big money party in Washington where all the food companies are showing up there, are you going to tell the Chinese they can't show up at the money party? It's not happening. I don't care what laws you have in place. When Citizens United, what the Supreme Court said there, you can't keep the foreign money out. It's exactly like trying to keep the freshmen in college out of the beer party being run by the seniors. It's not going to work.
Well, lately there's been information in the paper about how much farmland is actually owned by foreign corporations. I think Iowa and South Dakota are the only states in the country that do not allow foreign ownership of land. But Ohio is particularly got huge farms that were purchased by foreign companies. And also, just to let you know, so an oligopsony is that there is market concentration going in and coming out, right? Not just a month. So like the seeds that are GMO'd, the farmers have little choice in seed anymore since the Monsanto Bayer merger, and those seeds are genetically engineered for yield. So today you have to eat 4 servings of vegetables, 2 servings of fruit, and 4 servings of beef to get the same amount of nutrition you would have gotten in 1940 from 1 serving of each. Yeah. So, are you still mad? Yeah. Well, good. Well, one of the things I wanted to do here was to make you feel personally how all these things affect you in your lives. I mean, I assume we all lock our doors at night. We make sure we have gas in our car. We make sure our children are protected. Meanwhile, all of this is seeping in to interfere with every aspect of our lives. And the one true answer is to get money out of politics, and the only way to do that is to pass an amendment to the United States Constitution. And it's not like we've never done this before. 7 times in history, the people have risen up to pass an amendment to overrule a bad Supreme Court decision. Remember, this was created by 5 justices that were not elected by the people, who have corporate interests. They are pro-corporate. And the thing, all the controversy about the justices that are being put forward for all the levels in the government, the pro-choice, pro-life issue is not the big one. It is the fact that they have a history of ruling in favor of corporations. And I'd like to thank Richard Painter for being here and speaking about this, because as a corporate law professor, but maybe you'd like to say something positive about corporations to leave us on a good note. And then we could start our Q&A, and if you have a question, just approach the mic so we can get you on the tape. Thank you very much.
Corporations can be good, that they're well run by good people. Depends on who's in charge and what the objective is. If it's just to make a lot of money at other people's expense, that's not corporate citizenship. That's not what we should expect of our corporations. Our corporate leaders should be leaders in society and respected if they do their job, which is not just to make money, but to make money by making the world a better place. And corporations can do good things. And that's what we wrote in our book, Better Bankers, Better Banks. Banks have a useful purpose and can help raise capital for businesses, help people have a place to put their money and earn a return on their savings. I'm in favor of banks. Both my grandfathers were bankers. Banking can be a good thing, but it was a different model today, at least what happened before 2008, sorry, in the 80s. It's a complete, it turned into highway robbery. It's chaos. And we see this with the destruction of the environment. So we shouldn't be anti-corporation anymore. We should be anti-government or anti-church. But, governments, corporations, churches can be run responsibly or they can be run negligently and for selfish purposes. So that's what this is about. And corporations throwing their money around trying to influence government, that's not the corporate purpose. That's not corporate citizenship. They should be focusing on their business and a responsible business model that, yes, makes money, but also makes the world a better place. And then let the people choose the government.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. And again, if you have questions, please approach the mic and we'll be happy to get them answered for you.
I recently read, I don't know where, the New York Times or where, that Fox News should be called state media, not in Russia or in China. And what harm does it do for us? I mean, why don't we start talking about Fox News as being state media?
Well,
State-controlled media.
state control. Well, or was the state controlled by Fox News? I don't know. That's a chicken and egg problem. But the relationship, the love fest between the president and Fox News, it's amazing. And then he goes out and trashes the competition for Fox News. He's talking about their ratings all the time. It's a tragedy that we have people in the highest office, and not just the president, people working for him, who are attacking some of our best media outlets, including the New York Times and others, in favor of Fox News. And what I see on Fox News isn't much news. It's a fiction channel sometimes. But it's very disturbing what's happening, the attacks on the media. I believe that this president has crossed the line in impeachable conduct with respect to simply his attacks on the media. It's gone too far. The rhetoric that he's used against the media isn't that different than the rhetoric that has been used by dictators who talked about the lying press. This is not something we should tolerate in this country. So I'm more worried not as much about Fox News as about the attacks on other media outlets. That we need to stand firm in supporting a broad range of media outlets, and independent media is critical for democracy, and that's why the First Amendment is in there. It protects not just freedom of speech, but freedom of the press.
I'm curious about the environment in your classroom. Do you have a lot of students that argue with you, that disagree with you, or are they pretty much on board? What's your classroom environment situation?
Well, that's an interesting one. I tend to in my classroom, I focus on teaching the law, what the law is. A lot of the time I spend on, okay, this is what the government ethics rules are, on financial conflicts of interest. Just to give you an example, that the officials in the executive branch may not have a financial conflict of interest and participate in a matter that affects their personal financial conflict of interest. Then we'll teach them the law. We'll spend a fair amount of time on that. They'll say, okay, now here's the policy question. is it right that the president, the vice president are exempt from that? And of course, those who like the president and vice president say, oh yeah, you're a bunch of reasons. And then those people don't like them say, yeah, no, they shouldn't be. And then I say, okay, well, how about the members of Congress? And members of Congress in both political parties have financial interests that are not regulated and should be. There's a bill introduced by Senator Elizabeth Warren that is going to require that financial conflict of interest rules apply to the president, the vice president, the members of Congress. So I get the discussion going and try and bring in students who might have you, trying to get people to think, is your view influenced by who you like and dislike? Do you think that a conflict of interest for Donald Trump is bad because of the conflict of interest or because you just don't like Donald Trump? And then I'll find the name of a Democratic senator, I won't mention here, who has a financial conflict of interest. And what do you think of it? Well, maybe I'll look at it a little differently. So I like to ask questions, and then you get interesting answers.
I'd just like you to expand on something. Going back to what you were saying about corporate citizenship. I'm wondering if we're in sort of the genie's out of the bottle scenario. If you looked at corporate citizenship in the past, it was all pre-globalization, pre-transnationalism. When corporations, factories were in our place, the executive pay was what? Sure, it was more than the workers but by factors of 1 or 2 digits, not, the huge percentage there is now. Once people pulled out of that relatively prohibitive situation, like I'm saying, the genie was out of the bottle. Why would they care? How do we get people to think, could you possibly enforce the caring of a whole community? I just see that as a real tough nut.
Well, it depends on the circumstances. Let's talk. We've been through some of this before, extreme disparities in wealth. And President Woodrow Wilson had an answer to that. It's called the income tax. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt decided there needed to be a little bit of an upward adjustment there. Indeed, under President Eisenhower, we had a top bracket there 1 year, I think went to 90%. So there are ways to take care of some of that income disparity if you got the will, at the very, very top end there. So that's one set of issues, is distribution of wealth. The second set of issues, though, is harder. Is how do you get people to care about the local communities when you have more and more concentration of industry? And for example, these sulfide mines. Used to be we did iron mining here. We still do some iron mining. The mines were owned by Minnesotans who lived here. They built a big house up there in Duluth. If they had extra money, built a big one down here too. And so at least the people who owned the mine lived here, and their families lived here. If the mine was a mess, then, some of the family members might hear about it, down at the League of Women Voters or at the debutante party, I don't know where. But the bottom line is that once you have the people who own the company who really control it, or in Chile, in the case of Twin Metals Mine, or in Glencore selling the copper nickel to the Russians, they're all in Switzerland. It's a serious problem. They aren't going to care. So you have a number of options. One is what I always done with land. We'll say, well, the land needs to be owned by people who live in, at least in America, if not the state. When you have foreign nationals who want to do business, you better up the regulation. And you got to make sure that you're protected because they have every incentive to just, hit and run, and particularly if it's a resource extraction industry. Get what they want, get their profits, and leave you with a mess. It's not even their country. And then you sue them, they're nowhere to be found. I say, Glencore is founded by Mark Rich. He was a fugitive running all over the world. They couldn't find him until Bill Clinton pardoned him.
Professor, my question is about everybody. And that seems to be a big problem in political campaigns right now. Because of it, we don't know who's supporting a candidate. We don't know, we can't judge whether or not the elected official is voting for the
What do you think, Mick? Hey, you got the amendment, that's gonna help.
Well, yeah, the amendment, we'll make sure it's on the amendment, but certainly the states can pass disclosure laws, and so I believe the cities, there have been a lot of local disclosure laws passed, so we certainly can do it. And I don't know if he introduced it last session, but Senator Marty had a great disclosure bill that was very thorough. It was introduced the last day of the session before, so it didn't go anywhere at that point. But it mirrored California's disclosure law, which is the strongest in the country, I think. But yeah, we definitely can pass disclosure laws. So let's everybody contact our state reps and say, hey, we want you to support this law. I don't have a number for you right now, but do you know where there are disclosure laws this past time?
Well, we didn't do too well this past session, but it seems like the people in this state support disclosure. They support an amendment to reverse Citizens United, but we don't have our representatives representing the people. They tend to represent their party, and that seems to be something that we need to turn around.
You don't have any advice for that, do you?
Well, I think this obsession with loyalty to political parties is nuts. I'm an independent. I was in the Republican Party for decades. And, they said, well, you've got to, I'm more of a moderate to liberal Republican, like Arne Carlson, former governor of Minnesota. But just like Arne, who apparently has been banned from the GOP in this state, increasingly I just said, forget it. Once they particularly when they came up with Donald Trump. I ran in a DFL primary, but I was an independent. I wasn't going to say I'm a Democrat. I'm not going to swear loyalty to anybody. I got my views. I'll swear loyalty to the United States of America. And, that's the bottom line. And I got my views on issues, and I'm not going to toe the line because the party decides, well, it's a good deal to have sulfide mining because if we don't come out for sulfide mining, the Republicans will win this thing. Whatever. I'm not interested in that. There's right and there's wrong. And I think we need more Americans. We're going to forget about the party labels and vote on the issues. And we're going to hold politicians accountable when they're getting this money. And these dark money organizations. When you see those ads that run attacking a candidate, just turn off the tube. It's probably paid for by the Russians, for all you know. Do you really want to listen to that garbage? We can take control of our democracy. I'm absolutely for the amendment overturn the Citizens United, but I'm also for disclosure laws. President Obama said we needed more disclosure in 2010 after the Citizens United decision, and a Democratic-controlled House and Senate still wouldn't pass the law. They didn't want their campaign donors disclosed. The Republicans, I'll forget it. We need disclosure. We also need small dollar donors. Minnesota's program is great, the $50 tax credit. I wrote in my book that we ought to go nationwide with that at $200 off the top. Why should I pay taxes? Why should the first $200 go to a candidate of my choice? Who's going to spend or whatever they do with the rest of the money? So we need more small dollar donors in. There are a lot of different ways we can fight this problem, but we got to get busy.
Good afternoon. My name is Greg Copeland. I served on the St. Paul Charter Commission for 12 years. Recently, as a volunteer, by the way, appointed by the Chief Judge of the county on 3 different occasions. So I wasn't elected, is my point. But in any event, we have a problem right here in River City, right here in St. Paul, where our city council and our mayor have decided to appeal a judge's order that said the People's Charter, our city constitution, actually has real meaning, and it doesn't give the politicians a free exit, to basically take our constitution and literally throw it in the trash. We're 6,000 plus of us in the city signed a petition to put question before the body of the people in this coming election to not have this massive mandatory collection program of our trash, which has benefited a guy named Wayne Huizinga and his corporation called Waste Management. We've had 15 or so family businesses when we started this thing, and before they could even sign the ordinance, they lost a bunch. And then, since then, the 11 are now 6 being bought up by Waste Management. This is an example right here in our own home, our city. And, we don't have to go to
seen that in state, local governments all over the place. The trash collected business, that's a good way to make money if you know the mayor. Very important. Even in New York City, where I started by law practice, when I started practicing, and then they elected a guy named Rudy Giuliani mayor, oh boy. But I saw that in Illinois too. Trash collection, the other thing is the real estate developers, they love the city hall people. That's why Donald Trump was a Democrat for a while, because the Democrats ran City Hall, whatever. But bottom line is that there's certain industries that profit enormously from very close relationships with the mayors, with the city councils. And yet trash collection, real estate, they're toward the top of the line there.
As a leader, I appreciate your call to get people to go to the polls and vote. That's 100% the right way to do all of this. And vote for the candidate, no matter what their office they're running for. Ask them how they feel about the amendment. Because who are you voting for right now for city council or school board? By the time it comes to ratify the amendment, they could be in the state legislature, that does that. And also about voting, Hedrick Smith was in town. I don't know if you know who he was. He's a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist from the New York Times. And he was doing some work on his democracy initiative and the public versus the politicians. I highly recommend looking for the video on YouTube. He talked about in Texas in 2018, the three major cities, Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth, and Houston, all went blue. They were kind of little on that way, but they completely went blue. And so he called a political science professor he knows down in Austin and said, how did you flip? What'd they do to flip the legislature? And he said, no flipping was involved. They were all new voters. People turned out to vote. A lot of people of color, Hispanics, people, new voters, but people who had not voted before. And that's huge. So everybody needs to encourage everybody to vote. And in Minnesota, it is the easiest thing possible. There's no excuse for not voting in Minnesota because they make it very easy. So, thank you.
I would agree with everything you said with the importance of getting money out of politics, ignoring the challenge to do that. I would suggest that at least as important, if not more important, is having an informed public. Because that, at least to me, is where the problem gets. Because as well as intended as many elected officials are, once they get in office, they vote so totally different than, for example, just using an example of St. Paul, that the general public really was aware would never get through, but will go through easily without any trouble. And what this is a case of St. Paul, being supposedly a very progressive city, elected progressive, who are going to be right on the issues, particularly environmental issues, has taken a position of being carbon neutral by, I think it's 2050. Okay. So what is the city actually doing? The city actually currently, council is working on giving away regional parkland within a national park so a Japanese conglomerate can expand their transshipment of coal for permitting in this country, and they're throwing in $3 million of taxpayers' money on top of it. Honest truth, honest to God, what's going on right now, and it'll probably pass with the amendments forward. But the public doesn't get a chance to talk about reporting. They don't dig into those issues. The general public doesn't know this happens. They vote. They can, say to their friends that want to get this through, we did you the favor, and nobody knows, or few know, and they just go on.
How did they do it? Was it, they say they were going to create a lot of jobs from this project?
2 jobs. They pushed them on us, and they finally said, it's actually automating it, and I would bet that it actually will reduce the number of employees. But when pushed on it, they said, we'll create 2 jobs.
What do they say the city of St. Paul's getting at? The company's giving them a bunch of money? Or what do we get at? What does the city get at?
What's the deal is that the Port Authority, which nobody ever goes to meetings, don't know what they do,
I was about to say, there's a port authority and a union that tells me what I need to know. You know, I spent some time at the East Coast, and I'll tell you that port authority in New York and New Jersey, and then you throw in the unions and whatever. It's bad news. And there's the lack of transparency in a lot of these port authorities. You have these semi-public organizations that are really about trying to help people make money, the shipping companies and the rest of it. And at East, you get the mob involved, and so you can't talk about them too much, and you end up in the river there. But it's a very bad situation. And then, of course, you got to get a union boss, and that's, of course, what I'm running in the sulfide mining, is that the union boss has been paid off, and then that, over on the DFL side, makes it very hard to push back. And so it's a big problem. You have more and more foreign conglomerates. This one's Japanese, and they're going to argue that there's something in it for the city, and there's always going to be a deal, and there's always some land deal, some land swap. That's what we had with Polymet, a land swap. We get federal land, swap with their land, and they try to jam that thing through Congress. And the Trump administration is jamming it through, so they want to get into public land, and they just grease the skids with the politicians. And it always helps if you can get a union boss on board, and particularly if you have to deal with the blue side of the spectrum. With the red side of the spectrum, maybe you don't need the union boss, and you can do it at the country club. But they get the deal done one way or the other, and this is exactly the one with the trash example. The trash pickup in St. Paul, example of how this is going on at the local level. And the only way to fight back is to blow their cover and get these facts out there, get them on social media, and try to get the newspapers to write about it. Maybe the Pioneer Press. Will the Pioneer Press write about it? No, they've been bought off to whatever. Well, just another one is a stadium deal they did over there in Minneapolis. Well, the Star Trib was always in favor of the stadium deal. Why? Well, they own the land over around the stadium. The Star Trib made a fortune on that deal. So that's another thing. You get the newspapers, get a piece of the action, then whatever. It's not good.
Thank you for the question. I just want to make sure everybody's aware that the League of Women Voters St. Paul has an observer corps where members can attend meetings like the PUC or the Port Authority and City Council, that kind of thing, and then kind of report back, and we can have that information in our newsletters. So that is available if anybody wants to volunteer for it. So, well, thank you all very much for coming. That's our time. Thank you, Professor Palmer. Thank you, League of Women Voters and Landmark and SPNM. Have a great day and go to the park.